I think that when I said that I loved my brother, I kind of forgot how obnoxious he really is. He's a goddamn grown up with a job, a house, and about a dozen illegitimate kids to pay child support for. But when he's with me, he acts like he's a little boy again. And I don't mean that in a good way. After starting the day by pissing his name in the snow outside the front door, he served me scrambled eggs spiced with pepper and sugar, left a spoonful of marmalade in one of my boots, and kept banging on the bathroom wall from the other side while I was trying to take a dump. But at least we're making some progress on the whole trespassing thing. It's impossible to round up all of the workers, seeing as those who are currently on site have to constantly rotate around their assigned parts of the forest. Keeping them from doing their job would be utterly counterproductive, so we decided to stop by each of them on their rounds. This would mean a lot of walking for the two of us, but we were up for it. It's gotten even colder overnight, Cass remarked. Aren't you going to take a jacket? You know I can't, I replied gloomily, tugging on one of my white fur-trimmed gloves. The only other thing protecting me from the chill was the little fluffy cape attached to the particular wedding dress I was wearing that day. No point in complaining. Even after all this time? My brother gave me a deprecating laugh. Man, Jacek really dealt you a bad hand, didn't he? I don't want to talk about Jacek, I said curtly, my voice flat and monotone. Let's just get going. Cass merely shook his head, but at least he kept his mouth shut as we got on our way. Marching through the snow together, I almost felt like we were kids again. Like I'd just have to turn around and Jem and Marion would be right behind us. I've missed this, Casimir suddenly remarked, a wistful earnestness in his voice. I almost started at his tone. This wasn't what I was used to from him. Me too, I admitted hesitantly. I've tried to find other things to make up for it, but nothing ever quite compares. He went on, staring down at his boots. There was nothing else I could say. For 10 minutes or so, all we could hear was the sound of snow crunching beneath the soles of our shoes. Finally, we came across Fergus patrolling the edge of the forest adjacent to the red meadow. He was sipping hot cocoa from his thermos and greeted us with a slightly drowsy smile. When I asked him how he'd been, he said he'd had trouble sleeping, but insisted he was okay. Now, I trust him. Gus has been working for us for ages. He wouldn't rat us out. But perhaps he knew something. Why would anybody make our location public? He thought aloud upon being presented with the question. Money, Casimir suggested readily. I reckon one of your coworkers is taking bribes. That's sort of depressing to think about. I mean, the guys and I hang out all the time. Well, I'm going to keep an eye out, but that's about all I can tell you at the moment. We quickly said our goodbyes and went on our way to catch the next guard, Jose, another senior member on our staff. He didn't know anything either, but we still stayed to chat a little, and he seemed to be genuinely concerned. We went on to look up the others too, but to cut it short, we got nothing out of them. Cass said that it was a good thing we'd at least spread the word and made it known that we were suspecting one of them to be sabotaging us. Still, we needed answers, and I had an idea of where to get them. There's a small bathhouse on our property, right next to the main building. I believe my great-great-great-grandfather constructed it. It consists of a changing room and a steaming room, and it's actually really lovely, though none of us have used it in ages. I pay a lady to take care of the sauna nonetheless, though. Like many places on our estate, it's not as uninhabited as it might seem at first glance. It's a special place. I was actually born there. Hell, maybe even conceived too, but that's a little more unlikely. My mother insisted that it was a place of great spiritual value and danger, but she never used it for any of the activities she claimed could be conducted there. That's not all, though. When I was 16, I decided I wanted to go for a steam there. Mom was practically the only one to ever really use the bathhouse, and she'd been quite enthusiastic for us to try it out together. I had stayed far away from the place up to that point. It had always kind of creeped me out, what with all the talk of supernatural energy, but I was intrigued as well. And when I was 16, I figured it was time to check it out. Besides, steaming could be nice. So I went inside with Mom, on a day just as cold and wintry as this one. Both of us were wearing crosses around our necks, which Mom said we'd have to leave at the door. This rather confused me. but I readily left one of my boots outside for us and we placed our necklaces inside. We undressed in the changing room and each grabbed a bath broom on our way in. The bath brooms were simple bundles of birch twigs. Their leaves were already strewn all over the bathhouse floor. But when I asked Mom why we didn't just buy sponges or some actual stuff for the bathhouse, she only said that it was better to stick with natural materials sometimes. We'd fired up the sauna and were sitting in the steaming room. Nothing much happened, so I was actually quite at ease. The room had heated up quickly. It was a lot more intense than your normal sauna level of hot, though. Still, I found it rather enjoyable, and my mother appeared to be perfectly used to it. We didn't talk much, save for the occasional quip or remark. "Why don't the others ever come here?" I inquired. "This is kinda nice." "Dad says he doesn't like the heat, but I think he's just scared," Mom replied, idly playing with her bath broom. "I'm glad you aren't." "What's there to be afraid of?" "Sure, it's a pretty old building, but—" "Oh, it's not the building. It's the spirit." She gave me a meaningful smile. "We'll talk later. Let's keep it down for now, shall we?" That admittedly kind of freaked me out. It wouldn't have been the first time I'd encountered a supernatural entity, but just because you're used to something does not mean you should lose your respect for it. "So we're not alone right now?" I asked quietly. Mom grinned, shaking her head. Leaning over to me, she whispered, "He's hiding behind the benches." Despite the heat, her words sent a cold chill up my spine. "I think I want to leave," I muttered, rising to my feet. Mom looked a bit disappointed but didn't say anything to stop me. Just as I was heading for the doorway, I felt something sharp and pointy raking down my back, painfully tearing into my skin. I let out a sharp scream, spinning around only to find that Mom was still in her seat, frozen as a statue, staring at me with wide eyes. "What the fuck was that?" I whined. I could feel blood trickling down my lower back. My mother, freeing herself from her rigor, rushed over to hug me, casting an accusatory gaze into the room. "That was totally uncalled for," she shouted, her anger directed at somebody I couldn't see. "Come on now, honey. If the miserable old grouch doesn't want company, we'll just be on our way now," she told me, taking my hand and pulling me out into the changing room. Just as we were about to set foot through the doorway, we were stopped by a gush of scalding hot water hitting our backs. Both Mom and I cried out and spun around, just in time to glimpse a frail, hunched-over figure disappearing behind the benches. My heart was racing in my chest when the air suddenly filled with a strange, uncanny gibbering. It sounded like someone talking backwards, but really fast and in an eerie, low, brittle voice. Whatever lived inside that bathhouse, we'd angered it. "Let's just go," Mom squeaked, sounding like a little girl. She didn't have to tell me twice. We didn't take the time to dress, merely grabbed our clothes and sprinted, barefoot and naked, through the snow back to the safety of our house. My father, who had been watching us through the window, was laughing his ass off at us. "Care to explain?" I gasped, hopping around on the living room carpet as I was trying to put on my pants with shaking, frozen fingers. My mother huffed, finally sticking her head through the opening of the sweatshirt she'd been fighting with. "That was the Bannock. He moved into the bathhouse after my great-great-grandfather built it. Guess he was having a bad day. Though the scratching is something he's done before. Grandpa always said if you take a steam around Christmas time and the Bannock scratches you, it means the new year is going to be a bad one. But I don't really care, you know? You're my daughter, and the old skunk better keep his hands to himself around you." "But the scratching thing, is that like an actual prediction?" I asked, still kind of shaken. "Oh, I don't know. But I wouldn't trust the Bannock anyways. He's such a moody, dumb geezer. You know, he invites the woodland demons to bathe with him at night. That's why he doesn't want any crosses or religious items in there." "Shouldn't we see to it that he's, like, appeased?" I inquired cautiously. Mom snorted. "I won't. Let him rage in there if he wants to. He can burn down the bathhouse for all I care. I'm not going back there anytime soon after this." That same night, I snuck outside with a bucket of water. It had a pink block of soap swimming around in it, and seeing as I had stupidly filled it all the way up to the brim, I had to take great care not to spill anything. I had tucked a bunch of fir branches under my arm, increasing the difficulty of my endeavor. Once I finally reached the sauna, I sat everything down in the snow to knock on the door. "Hello?" I called out softly, trying to keep my voice from trembling. The bathhouse was lying in complete and utter silence. If there were any spirits inside, they were having a really quiet gathering. "I'm sorry to disturb. It's Fiona from before. I've come to apologize." Sure, I didn't actually believe I'd done something wrong, but it was best to take the humble route with beings like this one. I knew that even back then. The Bannock most likely didn't care about my standpoint. Ever so slowly, the door to the building swung open. Total darkness was waiting behind it, and I was reminded of a huge bear opening its mouth. While this felt like a prompt to step inside, I refrained from doing so, instead placing the bucket and the branches atop the stoop. To this day, I believe the creature inside must have been able to hear my heartbeat. That's how loud it seemed to me. I almost jumped when a bony arm with saggy, wrinkled, pale skin reached out from the pitch-black opening to pull my offerings inside. To my relief, the Bannock didn't shut the door immediately. Taking note of this opportunity, I summoned all my courage and spoke up again. "I was wondering if that was a sign you gave me earlier. Is the new year really going to be bad for us?" For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the strange gibbering started up again. Something about that noise was deeply unnerving to me. My skin crawling, I considered turning back and making a run for the house, when I suddenly realized that I could actually make out certain words amidst the jumble. "Particularly for you." I swallowed, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach like a cold, heavy liquid. "What's going to happen to me?" "I don't know exactly." "Am I gonna die?" I whispered shakily. "Just a part of you." "Please, sir, tell me what you mean," I implored, growing desperate. Maybe it was the fear in my voice or the fact that I'd brought him those gifts, but something appeared to have moved him enough to beckon me closer in that rattling, breathy voice of his. I hesitantly crept up the stoop, crouching down in front of the half-open door. "Do you promise to keep up this bathhouse? Will you see to it that it is clean and bring me soap and water?" "If that's what you want," I said slowly. "Then hold your head and receive my gift." With that, he pressed a gnarled finger to my forehead. His skin was damp and soft, leaving a wet spot between my eyebrows. "This will not enable you to see the future, but it will help you see imminent danger when it's hiding in plain sight. It's not infallible, and you might yet fall victim to your own naivety if you're not careful. But I'm sure you'll find it an improvement to your own weak senses." His arm withdrew. The door swung shut, and I was left alone in the nightly darkness, the only sound remaining being the whistling winter wind. Over time, something akin to a business relationship has developed from this odd encounter. The Bannock appreciates the effort I put into the bathhouse, despite hardly using it myself. At night, I can often hear voices from inside, carried over to the main building by the breeze. The Bannock's gift is the reason I could tell there was a disturbance in the aura of that one cryptid hunter I met. Of course, it's merely a heightened instinct and not at all reliable, but it's something. When I started wearing my wedding dress, he gave me another blessing, namely my heightened tolerance of uncomfortable temperatures. Cass knows there's a bunch of entities I'm on relatively good terms with, so he wasn't too surprised when I said we should go and consult the creepy old guy who lives in our sauna. Not that he's looking forward to it either. I guess we'll just have to see how it goes.